I was walking with my friend Nina in Nepal, and then these two guys passed us, and my friend Nina commented on that one of them had incredibly skinny legs, and that was Andy. Two and a half years later, he came and visited me in Oslo. And he asked me to marry him after 5 nights. So I guess that's sort of, I've never been asked to marry anybody before, and definitely not after 5 nights. So, yeah, so we then decided to do it, and the next year I moved here.
I first met Andy Mather when I was a medical student, and I went to Orange on my country term for 3 months. And then later, like 2 years later, when I became an intern, I went out to Orange Hospital, and he was the director of the emergency department at that stage. He had a pretty wicked sense of humour, which was often quite dirty and pretty dark, and he wasn't shy about sort of making jokes at work.
I think he really loved medicine in many ways. He really liked the difficulty cases where you had to really use your brain, and and that's what everybody told me, that he was a really great doctor, because if people have something weird, he often picked it up.
He just had just this gleam in his eye when he found out something that was interesting or unusual. And he had this energy about him that was like a restlessness, like he was constantly moving, and he'd speak so quickly that he'd get ahead of his thoughts, and then he'd go, for a while until he caught up with himself, and off he'd go again.
And the other thing he liked with emergency medicine was sort of the drama, I think. When you get all that excitement, you have to think really quickly, and everything you do matters, and you just don't know what's going to come in that door. I think in hindsight he probably had a dark streak all the time. It wasn't evidence for me for a few years, but he often could be moody. It's quite difficult to be with sometimes. Not all the time, but occasionally, even in the early years. I remember sort of a bit of lack of respect, I think, sometimes for me and my feelings and what I wanted to do. His first bout of depression was when Nicky was in kindy, when he first time had treatments, because he had suicidal thoughts, and he was off work for quite a while. Then I got pregnant again with Tobias in '99, and he decided he wanted to move to Orange, and he didn't actually ask me or the kids or anything, he just decided. And I think in hindsight that was probably, he thought if he just moved to the country he would feel better, which I think more and more I've been through a few things. You have to work on happiness from the inside and find a solution where you are, wherever you are, and start appreciating the small things in life, which I don't think he was able to do.
He had a huge impact on people, and he had a very large personality, and going along with that, I can imagine he's difficult. Like he was unhappy to accept the world as it was, because he was always demanding of it that it be better, and sometimes it was like he was being sort of internally eaten by something. He was always trying to do too many things at once. And more than once, you'd get calls in the emergency department from Hannah, his wife, saying, "Oh, look, is Andy still there? Can you send him home?" At the end of a day when he'd been there absolutely all day.
I think Andy always had problems with saying no to work. And I guess because he wasn't only responsible for his own work, but he was sort of responsible for a whole department. He felt like if he didn't make sure all the time that everything went smoothly, he couldn't sleep. So he rather stayed sure that everything was okay than to go home. But even when he was home, and then he wasn't really here. He preferred to watch telly compared to dealing with his children or talking to me or go to the movies or go for a walk. In the beginning of the year, he said he wanted to take leave, and he also said he didn't want ever to go back to work again. He didn't want to be a doctor anymore and things like that. And then he was home, and he drove me to desperation because he was just drinking. And, and you're sort of thinking, taking time off, and he said he was going to do this and doing that, but he just drank. And he had all this time in the day to drink because I was at work and the kids were at school. I think the thing that hits you with suicide is really, rightly or not rightly, that you have feeling guilt and failure to the person that died. That is really hard to get rid of, I think. I mean, I'm not perfect. I certainly wasn't perfect in that marriage, but my marriage was difficult. Sorry. But I don't know what else I could have done. I really don't.
As well as the general sort of grief and anger, there was a sense of, you fucking hypocrite, you were the one who was telling me that it was all going to be okay, and, you obviously didn't feel it yourself, or, there are so many barriers towards seeking help for mental problems when you work in a medical profession. Depression is just a fucker, and it doesn't matter how educated you are about the disease or intelligence in general, or Andy, he had such a sense of energy and a family that supported him, and a community who appreciated him, and it's not a preventative against it.
I think we met there, and it was when he was happy, like he was on a high, he was traveling with Bruce. He had fun, lots of physical exercise. It was really beautiful in Nepal in those days. And like he said, Kathmandu and Pokhara had really changed, because when we were there it was no cars. And now it's lots of cars and really polluted, and it just wasn't the same again, and you can't go back, you just can't go back. So I think he felt that as well, that it wasn't that ideal he had hoped it would be. I hope in the end I have more of the early memories. At the moment it's more of the late memories I have than the early memories. So it's hard for me, I think, at the moment. I do think wanted to be kind, and I think he was kind inside, and I remember that.